Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Roundtable Talks. I'm Simon Williams, and we're so glad to have you guys here tonight for our first ever episode. I'm alongside my partners Brock Landis and Chris Brown, and we're bringing you NBA talk all night. We're so excited to have you guys on board tonight. So our first topic is with the most controversial name in all of NBA, LeBron James. He's the greatest player in the world, hands down. That's a given. But right now in Cleveland, after losing the NBA Finals to the Golden State Warriors, he has opted out of his contract. Now, we saw with Miami, he had a similar situation, and they thought he was going to re-sign. But here, the Cleveland Cavaliers expect him to re-sign and remain in Cleveland. Chris, you're our NBA analyst, our NBA expert. What do you have to say on this right now?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind he's going to re-sign back with Cleveland. He wouldn't have came home if his thoughts wasn't to re-sign. The only way he wouldn't resign is if he doesn't want head coach David Blatt, he won't resign. If he wanted to, he could get rid of him. But I think he's going to keep him because David Blatt doesn't have a lot to say. So LeBron is really the one in the huddles calling the plays, calling the shots, as we seen against the Bulls where David Blatt almost ruined the game by calling a timeout, also calling the play for the game winner. The play originally was not for LeBron. He had LeBron passing the ball. It's not a smart thing to do if you got the greatest player in the world on your team.
I like what you said there because I do think that LeBron James does govern, per se, what goes on in huddles during timeouts and breaks and what have we. I think LeBron James can easily have David Blatt removed and have a new coach come in because he is practically the decision maker, rather. But of notable names for Cleveland, Kevin Love, J.R. Smith, Tristan Thompson, Iman Shumpert, and Matt Dellavedova, they're all free agents. So I think Cleveland is going to have to make sacrifices here and let a few players go, but I definitely think LeBron James is going to re-sign.
Well, LeBron might try to pull in some free agents. Personally, I think Dwayne Wade might leave. I don't think he's going to, but it's a huge possibility that he can come to Cleveland. But also, when you were saying those free agents, Kevin Love is expected to get a max deal, but I don't know how they're going to keep all those free agents. They're going to have to choose between Iman and JR. They might have to choose between Kevin Love and Tristan Thompson. As we seen in the playoffs, Tristan Thompson was huge for them when Kevin Love got that shoulder injury. So they might just they might let him go, or they might keep him. But if they keep him, it'll be cool to see what they're going to do with their front court rotation.
So I was reading online, Cleveland.com, they were reporting on this possible Kevin Love max deal situation. And with LeBron opting out and looking for a max contract, as he should, he's the best player, he deserves that money. Kevin Love has an offer on the table from the Cavs for 5 years, $100 million. So that's a max-level contract in the NBA. And for a superstar like Kevin Love, who was highly sought after at the trade deadline and will be this offseason, I think the Cavs need to put priority on re-signing him, a healthy Kevin Love for sure. That might not give the team much room to re-sign a guy like J.R. Smith or even Dellavedova if they're interested in that sort of situation. But Love should be their top priority in the offseason once they figure out the situation with LeBron after they signed him to a max deal.
Now, I was surprised that Cleveland moved Tyus Jones. They initially drafted him and traded him to Minnesota, which was a fantastic trade for the Timberwolves, as now they have three very fantastic young players, Andrew Wiggins, who won the Rookie of the Year last season, and Karl Anthony Towns and Tyus Jones, two candidates that can win this season depending on how their cards or how their seasons unfold, rather. But I do think that Kevin Love and LeBron James can definitely link up in Cleveland yet again because Cleveland does have that available salary cap. But I am surprised that they let a guy like Tyus Jones go because with J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert, both free agents, it's going to be tough to replace those guards that were pretty crucial in the postseason.
I agree. I think I don't see why they traded him. I mean, he could have helped out in the backcourt. We've seen in the finals how bad the backcourt was. Matthew Dellavedova had arguably two good games in the finals. J.R. Smith did not show up, and Iman Shumpert was playing horrible. Tyus Jones would have helped out the point guard situation, but he could play. He could have Kyrie go off ball. It would work perfect because he's a better scorer than Matthew Dellavedova. He might not be a better energy guy, but I mean, like he could score. He could get the ball around. He could do a lot of more things than Dellavedova.
I think Kyrie Irving has an unnameable impact for Cleveland if that's what you would like to label it. I think Kyrie Irving is a fantastic point guard. He spreads the floor and sees the floor really well. So I think a player like Kyrie complements players like Kevin Love and LeBron James. So as long as those three are together, I don't really think it matters who is signed or who's drafted. And provided Cleveland can keep those three healthy and on the court for a long time, I think Cleveland's definitely going to be a prominent team in the NBA.
Kyrie, we seen he's very versatile. In the NBA playoffs, you had LeBron basically running the point. Kyrie is coming off ball, but that's one part of his game. Another part of his game, he can play that point guard. He can dominate any point guard in the league. He can either average 25 points or 10 assists. He can do both. That's very crucial for them. If he's been injured every year of his NBA status. Every year he's been injured.
So I think what makes LeBron so important for the Cavs is his versatility as a five-position player, but Kyrie Irving is definitely a key to be watching out for Cleveland this year. And Brock, you mentioned Tyus Jones being moved to Minnesota and how that's such a good deal for the Timberwolves. And if you look at their draft class, they got Karl Anthony Towns and Tyus Jones, two excellent college players who made their name this season and led their teams to Final Four runs. Duke obviously winning the national championship, Tyus Jones having an excellent championship game, and overall a great season under head coach Mike Krzyzewski at Duke. But Tyus Jones' impact translating to the NBA, I think is something that we would have to wait a few years to see a full progression. Or that he's sort of smaller, he's definitely younger than the rest of the guys in the NBA, and I think that also has to do with the NCAA allowing the one and done situation. But that's that's the topic for another day.
Okay, and I also wanted to add that a player like Tyus Jones can really learn a lot from LeBron James under his wing, but I do think that Tyus Jones will play really well in Minnesota depending on how well that coaching staff is next year and how well players like Kevin Garnett can mentor those players. I know he's going to do a great job with mentoring Karl Anthony Towns, but we'll see how he can fare with a point guard like Tyus Jones.
I liked your point when you were talking about Kevin Garnett mentoring Karl Anthony Towns. Ricky Rubio may be able to mentor Tyus Jones. Ricky Rubio isn't old, but he had a lot of experience. He's a great passer. We're probably one of the best passers at the point guard position this league has seen in a while. Him and Tyus Jones have a good rotation. Plus, when you're talking about Kevin Garnett mentoring Karl Anthony Towns, they kind of play similarly when you're talking about facing up. But Karl Anthony Towns is more versatile because he's stronger. He can put you in the low post. He's NBA ready. He can play. If you can put him right now on any team, and he could be the star if he wanted to.
So on to our next topic tonight. I think this fits right in. We've been talking about young players like Tyus Jones and how they've been traded on draft night. If we look more in depth to the NBA draft, I think with the past couple of weeks we've been talking that the Sixers had the most intriguing spot overall at the number 3 selection. And I would like to get your guys' opinion on that. I know we've been talking the past week about it and how the Sixers really could have made their mark for the next couple of years just with one selection on Thursday night. So, Brock, what do you have to think about the Sixers coming after Thursday night's draft?
I think that the Sixers could have at least drafted a guard. What they did do was draft a forward in J.P. Tokoto, which was a relevantly good pick, especially for a later pick in the draft. I believe you mentioned he was third to last earlier before the show, so I do think that was a good pick coming out of North Carolina. However, Jahlil Okafor was an even better pick for the Sixers at number 3. I think he fits perfectly into Sam Hinkie's rebuilding system, and Brett Brown will be able to coach him extremely well, being that he was an assistant in San Antonio, and he's worked with great forwards in his career. I do think Okafor is very happy to play for the 76ers. I think the controversy as of late with him aggressively throwing down his uniform and being disappointed about drafting 3rd overall by the Sixers, I think that's nonsense, and I think Okafor is ready to play and will be an extremely important asset for Philadelphia.
You mentioned the jersey tossing. I saw the videos and the GIFs. Deadspin was trying to push it and make it seem like the Sixers were in a difficult situation that Jahlil didn't want to play. But I think that's far from the truth. We saw Jahlil, how he tried to fold it before the other guys did, and then once he realized the 2 other players were still holding it up, he kind of was in an awkward situation. So I think this shouldn't even be an even topic of controversy with the team. I think we saw how Joel Embiid reacted and how Deadspin even tried to blow that up with his serious face after he was selected by the Sixers, and we all know that he loves to play here in Philadelphia. So I think that Jahlil and Embiid, in a similar situation over draft night controversy, will be just fine in the coming years.
I agree with you 100%. There's no real controversy here. It's just the jersey. It's not like you screamed, "I don't want to play here," or tweeted, "The Sixers are the worst franchise ever." He just had obvious situation with the jersey. But when you're talking about the draft, other than Jahlil Okafor, a lot of the Sixers picks were questionable. In the second round, their best choice was getting J.P. Tokoto, the swing guard for North Carolina. He's very versatile, but he's raw. He has raw potential. And the Sixers aren't going to be good for a while, so they can develop that. But in the second round, we passed on a lot of good guards that could help us. Like, for example, Darian Hilliard out of Villanova. He might not have started, but he could have contributed off the bench, just like KJ McDaniels did before we traded him. And also with the 60th pick, instead of getting a whole bunch of centers and forwards in the second round, we could have drafted Aaron Harrison out of Kentucky. He might not be the best guard, but with the 60th pick, you can't go wrong with anybody.
What really I think the Sixers could have done better is select Darren Hilliard in the second round. Sixers had 5 second-round picks, I believe, and not being able to take a guy who they have seen only 10 minutes west of Philadelphia's Villanova University. They've been able to see him all year. He's been playing dominantly the entire season, and I think if the Sixers were to be able to snag him, even if they were to move him later, he has such high value for being such a spot-up shooter, left-hander, excellent passer, and he can give some life for this young team who I thought really could have used a guy like Hilliard.
I do think that the Philadelphia 76ers should have made a move in trading Nerlens Noel, considering the fact that they have 3 very hyped-up forwards and centers, in Okafor, Embiid, and Nerlens Noel. I believe that the Celtics put together a trade package for Okafor, but the Sixers smartly declined it, is what we assume as fans and viewers of the 76ers and viewers of the draft. That's what we assumed, but what we did know was that the Celtics did offer Marcus Smart and their 16th overall pick to Philadelphia for Nerlens Noel, who proved to be a very good player in last season. But I do think the 76ers smartly declined that as well, as much as I do think it would be important to have a guard like Marcus Smart commanding the floor for Philadelphia and also a 16 pick to draft where the Sixers needs. I think building around Noel and Okafor is very smart, provided that we don't know if Joe Embiid is a healthy center.
I think they drafted Jahlil as a safety blanket. Joel Embiid has foot problems, and foot problems for a big man is horrible. So while he's recovering, him and Norris will be the Twin Towers. It'll be weird to see what will happen when Joel Embiid comes back. Are they going to trade one of them, or are they going to have a 3 big man rotation? What are your thoughts?
I think it'd be really interesting to see how the Sixers play this out. I think it really depends on Joel Embiid's injury. And I think Sam Hinkie, coming into the draft, was expecting to get D'Angelo Russell. We did know that the Lakers were high on both Russell and Okafor, so they had that chance to take either one. So if the Lakers went Russell, the Sixers were definitely going to go Okafor, best player available. And that also was a backup spot. So if Embiid's injury proved to be worse than expected, they have a backup right there with Jahlil Okafor and Nerlens Noel. So I think it's a great situation for the Sixers to be able to get a third center, and that gives them the space to move one of these 3 pieces around if the need comes up. So the Sixers, I think, are in a very good position with their centers, and I wouldn't be in a I wouldn't have it any other way if I was GM of the Philadelphia 76ers. One center, though, I think that has been gaining national attention over the past couple of years was Naismith Player of the Year in college was Wisconsin center Frank Kaminsky. I am not a fan of Frank Kaminsky. I can't stand the kid. But I think there were some rumors going on that the Phoenix Suns were interested in trading up for Kaminsky. I'm glad they didn't do that because that would have ruined their franchise. But unfortunately for the Charlotte Hornets, they drafted Frank Kaminsky. I'm only kidding there. I think he's a great player, but definitely not my fan favorite. His stretch three-point shot ability as a center is important in this game that's evolved so much from back-to-the-basket centers now to stretch players that can shoot all across the court. So I just want to get your guys' thoughts on how Kaminsky will pan out in the NBA.
I personally don't think Kaminsky's a good basketball player. Obviously, he's good enough to win Player of the Year awards, take Wisconsin so deep in the NCAA tournament, and get drafted as a lottery pick. But I think Frank Kaminsky won't pan out, and as racist as this sounds, a lot of the white players that are hyped up coming into the draft don't pan out. As we saw with Doug McDermott, although he didn't get much time, he didn't pan out either thus far. So I don't think Kaminsky's going to be that good. He's not that great of a rebounder. He's a lazy defender, and he lacks ability to get to the basket with the ability to fight through contact in the paint. So I don't think he's going to be able to thrive in the NBA.
And I have one quick note on that. We saw in the championship game that Jahlil Okafor was able to shut down Kaminsky on defense in the paint, and people have called Okafor a bad defender. But we saw that Frank Kaminsky wasn't able to get a solid shot off the entire second half when his team really needed it. So just showing that Jahlil Okafor defensively can be great, and that Frank Kaminsky offensively can be poor. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I agree. Frank Kaminsky he's a talent, but NBA ready, I don't think so. He's weak to play that power forward center position, especially in Charlotte, where Al Jefferson is getting up there in age, and their front court isn't the best. They just traded away Noah Vonleh. They drafted last year, who was going to be a good talent, but they got rid of him. Fans, I don't know what. So Frank Kaminsky, I think, to me, to be more NBA ready, has to work on his scoring down low. He has to work on his strength and rebounding. When we're talking about picks, the next draft pick was Justice Winslow of the Miami Heat, and I think that's the best pick all night. He's perfect for them. He could back up Dwayne Wade. Also, he could start the three-man because Wall was inconsistent last year. But with Justice Winslow, you got a guy that can score, rebound, and probably one of the most versatile, if not the versatile, player in this draft. He had the potential to go. He could have went where D'Angelo Russell went. He's that great of a potential. He could probably defend better than Russell, rebound better than Russell. He maybe not passing ability Russell has him, and maybe shooting, but he can do all those things very good. He's a very great player, and I hope it pans out for him in Miami.
Yeah, and Justice Winslow is well received by the Miami Heat fans. We were with a couple Heat fans this week, and they were really excited going into this draft because that's who they wanted. That's who the Miami Heat really wanted to snag, and they were extremely worried that Frank Kaminsky wasn't going to get picked by the Hornets, and that I was surprised personally too that Charlotte did not go with Winslow. Also knowing that they've been able to see a lot of him because he played at Duke, and they've been able to be so close with the Duke Blue Devils organization and all that. So I was kind of surprised Charlotte didn't go for him there, but Miami Heat is so happy. All their fans are so happy that he fell to them at that spot there.
Winslow's draft stock definitely increased after the tournament, and after the departure of LeBron James, Miami has been searching for a small forward. They haven't been able to attain one in recent years. We see Dwayne Wade suffers through injuries constantly. Chris Bosh's injury last season was crucial, but Miami was still able to almost make a playoff run, and in that Eastern Conference with a lot of teams on the downfall rebuilding, I think Miami is a team who can easily slide into the Eastern Conference Finals or Eastern Conference Championship, and I do think Justice Winslow is a player that can bring an instant impact for Miami.
Couldn't agree with more. But I just would like to talk about Emmanuel Mudiay and him with the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets had a chance to get Justice Winslow or Stanley Johnson, but they passed on both of them and got a point guard when they know they still have Ty Lawson. To me, what that shows is that they want to move him around. I think they're ready to rebuild around him and maybe Kenneth Faried, but I don't know how that's going to pan out when Kenneth might want to go where Ty Lawson went. They're the last two people. Well, I don't want to say last two, but key players with the George Karl era. And if they trade Ty Lawson, Kenneth Faried might say, I want to go too. So this might be Emmanuel Mudiay by himself. I like to see how that's going to pan out. I want to see where they're going to trade Ty Lawson, who they're going to trade him for, or if they're going to trade him, and if they're just going to release him.
Yeah, there's a few rumors swirling around that Ty Lawson may wind up with the Sacramento Kings. Now, that's something I don't really see panning out, but I know a lot of Philadelphia media have been really thinking that Ty Lawson would be a great fit here at the Philadelphia 76ers, and that if Ty Lawson, and the Sixers and Ty Lawson work out with the Nuggets in a trade, that would just be one step quickening the process and quickening this rebuild. I don't think Ty Lawson would want to go from one bad team to a really bad team in the Philadelphia 76ers, but I do think he would want to go from a bad team to a team on the rise, and we don't see any sign of progression from the Nuggets. But I do like Emmanuel Moody as a player. I think he will definitely help them in the upcoming years.
All right. When you were talking about where Ty Lawson would go, he could go to the Kings. That would be a good fit for him. Darren Collison was hurt most of the year last year. Their point guard spot was iffy. But if he goes there, it'll be interesting to see what they would trade for him. Would they trade away Willie Colley that they just drafted for him, or would they trade away DeMarcus? But I think where he could go, if he goes to the Sixers are definitely giving up one of their big men. If it is, I doubt it's going to be Jahlil. I doubt it's going to be Noel. I doubt it's going to be Embiid. It looks like the Sixers would rather give away Noel than anybody. I don't see why. He's their best defender. He's not as polished on the offensive end, but he has key to improve. He's probably the most versatile big man they have because he can run, jump, and he's working on his low post. But his low post, I don't want to see him in the low post at all. I see him as a young Dwight Howard, run, jump, block, set screens, and catch lobs. And he might not be an all-star, but he'll give you a good 10 and 15 or 10 and 10.
I agree with that. And speaking of trades, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, a player that Simon and I are very big fans of, was initially drafted by Portland and then traded to Brooklyn in a trade that would send Mason Plumlee and their 29th overall selection to Portland, and Portland would send Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, the stretch player, and Steve Blake to Brooklyn. I think that Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is a beautiful player. I think that he is a high motor, which makes him a great defender. He's a tough player to defend as well because he's left-handed. He gets to the basket and he fights through contact. He's a clutch player, as we saw in the NCAA tournament. He's very energetic. In the tournament, he played fantastic. Stanley Johnson fouled out and also only scored 5 points in a game prior to playing Wisconsin State, in which Arizona would advance, and Rondae Hollis-Jefferson scored 20 points and also grabbed 10 rebounds that game. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson in 2014-15 also averaged 11.2 points per game, about 1 block per game, about 2 assists per game, and roughly 7 rebounds per game. So I think Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is one of the best players in this draft, and I think he'll flourish for the Brooklyn Nets.
Simon?
Yeah, I really like Rondae Hollis-Jefferson as a player. He's really quick on defense, and a lot of people are excited about him in Brooklyn. He's a 90 overall ranking by NBA Draft.net, which is a really good NBA prospect website. They also note that his 7'1" wingspan is excellent for his size, and seeing him being so versatile and quick on defense would be really important. Knowing that Brooklyn just lost Mason Plumlee by a trade, bringing in a guy who can be a stopper on defense and still score is really important. We saw Mason Plumlee go overlooked, coming out of Duke, and he was able to fight his way into second place in Rookie of the Year voting behind Michael Carter-Williams 2 seasons ago. So he made his mark in the NBA's Rookie Year, even being an overlooked athlete. But Rondae Hollis-Jefferson will fit right in with the Brooklyn Nets. I think he's a great fit there, and they're really high on him there for his attitude on defense. I do think he needs to work on his free throw shooting. He's a little bit streaky in that department. I think he's an overall great player and will be extremely impactful in the Eastern Conference.
I couldn't agree more. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is one of the best versatile players in this draft. He could play shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and I think that's why the Brooklyn Nets like him so much. But when we're talking about this trade, we can't forget it's a 2-team trade. The other team, the Portland Trailblazers, I think they got Plumlee because they're ready. They are preparing that LaMarcus Aldridge might leave them, and they need to find some people that they can build around. That's why they got Norvon, Lay, and Henderson. They need because I don't think if they get rid of LaMarcus Aldridge, they're not making the playoffs. Damian Lillard can't do it all on his own. Last time we seen Damian in the playoffs, I don't want to say he choked, but it was like it wasn't the Dame that I'm used to seeing. And I think LaMarcus Aldridge is sick and tired of not getting deep in the playoffs. He's not old, but he's in his prime. He's ready to win now. We're talking about LaMarcus leaving. I think he's going to San Antonio. He's going to San Antonio. That could be a championship team next year. But let's talk about the Sixers. My favorite team, drafting so many big men. We have depth all around in the big man position. But when we talk about our guards, they are weak. How do you think that happened?
I think they definitely have a lot of depth now in the forward and center department, but I do think this was not that smart of a move by Sam Hinkie. They were last in rebounds in all of the NBA last year, so in essence, it was smart because now he's drafting towards his needs and he wants to grab more rebounds off the bench and for his starters as well. But I do think this wasn't the smartest move considering that Philadelphia is lacking a lot of talented guards on their rebuilding team.
I think JP Tokoto falling so late in the second round was a great steal for the Sixers. I think since he fell, the Sixers were able to scoop him up really quickly with the third to last selection in the draft. So he's a small forward, but he can shoot really well. At Carolina, he did face Jahlil Okafor a few times. So I think that little rivalry from Tobacco Road will translate into good chemistry. You see how that happens sometimes in the NBA. So I think those two guys working each other out, feeding into Jahlil in the paint would be a great fit. But in terms of big men, I think the Sixers were really looking for just stoppers on defense. And I think that's why they went in that direction. So I can see where Sam Hinkie is going, but I wouldn't be surprised if at least 3 of these players are moved by the trade deadline this upcoming season.
Well, the Sixers, they had chances to get guards. There's guards that weren't drafted that we could have drafted other than these big men from Europe. Some of them, they might turn out to be players, but I'd rather draft somebody in the United States, not trying to be rude or anything, but we don't know if these guys are going to come up. Just like Dario Saric. We thought he was going to come this year, but he didn't come. He didn't show up. He's reportedly going to show up next year, but we never know. But I'd rather take my chance on a guy that I know he's going to come to my team if I draft him. Not a guy that he might come in 1 year, 2 year, or he might not come. That could be a waste of a draft pick. We could have got a guy like Hilliard. He'd have been perfect for us. Come off the bench at that 1 or 2. He could get at least 8, 10 points a game. But seeing how the Sixers are drafting, I honestly don't think they want to win now. If they wanted to win now, they got depth at the guard position. They have more than enough second-round picks to get depth. We're just getting big men that might not pan out for years. And the way they're drafting is like they don't want to win for years. If I'm a Sixers fan, I'm ready for us to win now. My opinion.
Well, just to quickly go back to some Rodney Hollis-Jefferson talk, this will be real quick. One of our listeners, Rob Young from Philadelphia, he just texted me, and he just said, do you think Thaddeus Young's status will change with the Nets with Rodney Hollis-Jefferson now being in Brooklyn, knowing that Rob noted that Thaddeus Young has opted out of his contract? And I really think it's a big change for him. We saw Thaddeus thrive for a couple seasons, made an All-Star game push, didn't get the selection, but was in All-Star game worthy and a few seasons ago, but it just didn't pan out here in Philadelphia. He's definitely an NBA player. He's not D-League level. He's a great athlete, but I don't see him remaining with Brooklyn, knowing that Rodney Hollis-Jefferson is in his place at that small forward position. So just to quickly go back to what we were talking about, we were talking about some big men and how the game has evolved from back to basket centers to stretch players. One player that has remained true to the fundamentals is Tim Duncan. He and the San Antonio Spurs have been known under Greg Popovich to being such a fluid, well-rounded team. And the Spurs are also in a tricky situation. Brock, you've been talking about Duncan and Ginobili with the possibility of them leaving. Why don't you give us some on that?
Well, Tim Duncan and Ginobili both noted to the media that they are almost positive they're returning for one final season. This puts the Spurs in a tricky position because San Antonio has nurtured, I can't get that out. They've nurtured Tim Duncan and Ginobili over these past decades, and so I definitely think that they want to keep them on the team and retire them in a San Antonio uniform, but they also want to look at the options of extending Kawhi Leonard, who's debatably their best player, and also signing free agent LaMarcus Aldridge, who can play the 4. So bearing in mind that Tim Duncan is likely going to return to San Antonio, Duncan can play either the 4 or the 5, as can LaMarcus Aldridge. But we do know that LaMarcus Aldridge is a perimeter shooter inside and outside the paint. He's able to spread the floor. So if Aldridge can play the 4 and Tim Duncan can play the 5, that can give Aldridge more of a workload and make it a little bit easier for the aging Duncan.
I think this LaMarcus Aldridge situation is really intriguing. We've heard he may go to the Kings. There's some possibility even the Lakers and the Spurs looking to sign him. These are all big names, big-name teams looking to sign an all-star. So the Spurs would need that cap space, though. And with Ginobili and Duncan, towards the end of their contracts and the end of their careers more so, we may see the Spurs kind of nod at a retirement for these two guys. And I don't know how well that would sit with Duncan or Ginobili, being that they are both Spurs for life, and that's really how they've defined their careers as being San Antonio Spurs.
Yeah, I think San Antonio's organization can either let Tim Duncan and Ginobili retire, take a pay cut, or just learn to deal with these signings, because if they bring Ginobili and Duncan back on board and are seriously pursuing LaMarcus Aldridge, then they're going to have to introduce players like Tim Duncan into a new role, which he may not be comfortable with.
And Kawhi Leonard was going to need max money. He's Defensive Player of the Year. He's earned that right to get some money there from the Spurs organization. So with Kawhi taking up a lot of money and a possibility of LaMarcus Aldridge taking up a lot of money, I think that would force the Spurs to let Ginobili go, let him leave, and I think he could flourish in a couple of years for a playoff contender. I don't necessarily see how a team like the Cavaliers, who's finals ready, or the the Golden State Warriors, who are finals ready, would necessarily need amount of Ginobili, but a playoff contender or a finals contender like a Houston Rockets or a Los Angeles Clippers, I think would be a great fit for him, because he could give them that extra little push that they need to get to the finals.
And speaking of aging players and free agency, Chris, I know you wanted to talk about Paul Pierce opting out of his contract. Give us a little bit about that.
Well, Paul Pierce was with the Wizards 1 year. He helped them in the playoffs, hitting clutch shots when they needed him. They lost to the Hawks in 6 games in the semis, and he opted out of the contract. Support saying that he wants to go to the Clippers. I honestly don't see that happening. I think he only wants to go there because Doc is there, and he thinks they can win a championship. But they just traded for Lance Stevenson, and he's going to be starting this year. I don't see Paul Pierce starting, and he opted out. I don't know where he's going to go. There's a lot of teams that can use him off the bench, maybe play him as that stretch 4 in the playoffs. But in the regular season, I think he's just going to sit on the bench and just ride the bench. But in the playoffs, he could be great for any playoff team. He could go out to the Cleveland, but I don't think Cleveland has enough money for them. He's not going to the Spurs, not going to the Raptors. But teams that are ready to win now, and they think this is their moment, he'll be perfect for them.
Now, I do think if he went to the Los Angeles Clippers, he would have a minor role. Role wouldn't be as big as it was in Boston. It wouldn't be as big as it was in Washington, as we do know that the Clippers just did acquire Lance Stevenson, and J.J. Redick emerged as a very big threat in the NBA and a player that needs to be guarded because he is a very good perimeter shooter last season.
I think we saw the Wizards' take on this as they got Kelly Oubre in the draft on Thursday night. So that was kind of the small forward replacement for Paul Pierce, because we saw how effective Oubre was in college at Kansas, and he was definitely one of the best small forwards in the country, able to shoot and guard extremely well. Possibly just a younger fit instead of Paul Pierce. So I think Paul Pierce really controls the cards here. He holds the cards in his deck. He can, as a free agent, he can decide where he wants to go. And I think all signs are pointing to the Clippers. I don't know whether that will happen. I think that's yet to be seen. But I think towards the end of free agency, that will come. That'll come out as one of the top storylines.
Paul Pierce, he opted out of the Wizards. This year, their back was more for Otto Porter. In the regular season, he was a dud. He was just a guy that you didn't talk about a lot. But when it came to the playoffs, he really emerged against the Raptors and against the Hawks. He showed his true potential as a lottery pick, which he was a couple years ago. But I don't know if he is ready to start, and I don't even know if Kelly Oubre is ready to start. So it'll be interesting if they're going to sign a free agent small forward like Amari Carroll that played for the Hawks. If he leaves to be that small forward position, or if they have their trust in Otto Porter to start, or if they think Kelly Oubre is a better fit for them right now other than Otto Porter.
I personally am not a fan of Otto Porter Jr. We saw how he lacked a little bit in the mental department on defense and even on offense. He would struggle to really map out the play beforehand, and I think that just comes down to basketball IQ, whether knowing the plays and sticking to the rhythm of the team. So I don't see Otto Porter Jr. as the future of the Wizards organization. That's obviously John Wall, and that's his team. So I think that situation comes down to whether John Wall is willing to allow Otto Porter to be a focal point of the offense, and if he is aware enough to play on defense. That's just me.
I don't think that Porter's going to become a focal point, but he was a pretty intimidating factor in the postseason last year. And I think Porter can really stretch the floor and also play as a utility player. Porter was pretty good at handling the ball in tough defense, and he was pretty good at spacing the floor, which took a load off of John Wall and Bradley Beal's shoulders, as that's usually what they do as two dominant passers.
So transitioning from the Wizards back to our sort of big men talk, we've been talking about Tim Duncan, Jahlil Okafor, Karl Anthony Towns. These guys are big names in the post, and they're big names across basketball. Brock, I've noticed over the past 20 years, I know I haven't been around that long, but been watching a lot of basketball in my life. So I think I've noticed that these guys have more the tendency for centers to become stretch players and shoot farther from three and stretch the floor on offense and not necessarily be in the paint all the time. So I'd just like to get your take on that, knowing that that Jahlil and Karl Anthony Towns can play two different styles of basketball, yet they were the two top centers of the draft.
I don't necessarily like their styles of basketball. I think that centers and forwards are meant to play within the perimeter, grab rebounds, take shots from 2 to 3 feet out, and be dominant, hard-nosed basketball players. I do think it brings a lot to a team if your forward or center can go out and stretch the floor and shoot threes, but I don't necessarily think it's that good of an asset to teams because I think centers are really defined as hard-nosed basketball players who are in the paint doing everything they can to be physical.
Well,
Chris, what's your take on that?
He is the center that plays in the middle. He's not a stretch guy like Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns, he has 3-point range. Jahlil Okafor, he's like a DeMarcus Cousins maybe. If they stay in between that 20 and the entire range, he's a bully in the paint. If you have him on the low block, he will go into the bucket. Same thing as Karl Anthony Towns. Personally, I love his game because he can play inside and bully, or he can take it out to the 3-point line. So to me, he's a great talent, and I'd love to see how he'll fit in the NBA.
And I think a guy like Frank Kaminsky, who we were talking about earlier, people have been noting that he has great 3-point range, and he's more versatile than someone give credit to on offense, as he's got some quick moves. But I really don't think he is the future of his style of play is the future of the NBA. We saw Jahlil Okafor just dominate him on offense and defense in the championship game, like I noted earlier. But Jahlil was also the leading scorer on his team, and all he did was just get the feeds in for the basket and lay it in or dunk it or get assists. So I think Jahlil's more old school style, Hakeem Olajuwon-ish style of play, I think is better suited for the NBA, even though a lot of players have been trying to change it.
Okay, and
quickly transitioning into basketball free agency. I think, Brock, you've been knowing a lot about these free agents coming into this upcoming season. Just tell us about what teams could possibly sign these big names.
New York and Los Angeles are two proactive teams, the Knicks and the Lakers precisely. The New York Knicks are very interested in signing Greg Monroe and Jimmy Butler, which are two free agents that are likely going to return to their teams, but we don't know how that's going to pan out. And the Los Angeles Lakers are also interested in signing players of that sort, Greg Monroe, Kevin Love as well, and Jimmy Butler.
Simon?
Yeah, I think Jimmy Butler is an interesting name coming into the season as a free agent. He's a couple landing spots, but I really think Phil Jackson and the New York Knicks is going to be an interesting move, an interesting team to look at going into the season, as they have some financial cap space, but they do have Carmelo Anthony to worry about, and he really has been known to be a bad teammate. A lot of people say Kobe is the bad teammate of the NBA, but Carmelo, Knicks fans will even call it themselves, he's one of the worst attitudes anyone's ever seen in the NBA.
The Knicks have a lot of potential to make a lot of moves. They could sign key free agents like Paul Millsap or Tobias Harris. Millsap is a forward position, but if they get him, their 4th overall pick, Porzingis will come off the bench. Also, people like the Sixers, they have a lot of money. They have a lot of potential to get better this offseason by signing point guards, shooting guards, small forwards, power forwards. I think personally they should get a point guard and like Reggie Jackson, like Reggie Jackson, or they get a big man like LaMarcus if they have the money or if they have the talent. But personally, LaMarcus Aldridge is not going to sign with us unless he sees that we have a winning attitude. And by our draft picks and our past couple years, our attitude is rebuilding.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say LaMarcus Aldridge is destined for New York, but I really think it's going to be more Clippers or Lakers or Spurs if LaMarcus Aldridge is going to leave Portland.
Speaking of the Lakers, I wanted to talk about a DeMarcus Cousins trade. The Lakers were a team that were interested in DeMarcus Cousins prior to draft night, and seemingly enough are still interested in DeMarcus Cousins. That Sacramento organization doesn't necessarily want to have to deal with DeMarcus Cousins' attitude, but they love his talent. I know Coach George Karl wanted to trade not only Rudy Gay and players like Ben McLemore, but also DeMarcus Cousins, and the team that was willing to swoop him up was the Los Angeles Lakers. However, Sacramento did ask for a little too much. As we know, they asked for players such as Jordan Clarkson, Julius Randle, and the number 2 pick. But as of right now, Los Angeles has stated that they're even willing to trade their number 2 pick, D'Angelo Russell, who's a very good guard, presumably, for DeMarcus Cousins, which would be an interesting option to explore for Sacramento.
Yeah, CBS Sports has been reporting over the last couple of days that D'Angelo Russell might be not staying in Los Angeles for very long. There's a chance that Sacramento could be making a deal for Russell in exchange for DeMarcus Cousins. Now, that also has a lot of that's also important to note that LaMarcus Aldridge coming to the Lakers would impact that deal, knowing that they would have to take on the salary of both Aldridge and Cousins. So the Lakers are in an interesting position as well in terms of free agency. I feel like they're always one of the top names in free agency and trading just because of the LA name value. But I really am excited to see how the Lakers approach this free agency period.
Los Angeles is a very big market, which is why a lot of free agents might want to go there as their destination. We know that Los Angeles has interest in Greg Monroe, Jimmy Butler, Kevin Love, and even LaMarcus Aldridge, as you mentioned. But if they did acquire DeMarcus Cousins and did not give up Julius Randle, they probably won't have to sign one of those forwards. But we do know that the Lakers are showing interest in signing Rajon Rondo, and the Dallas Mavericks have no interest in re-signing Rondo. So that can be a team that can easily obtain Rajon Rondo, and that might be one of the reasons why D'Angelo Russell might be moved. But as you said earlier, Ty Lawson to Sacramento is an option, so we'll have to see how that would work if Lawson, Russell, and Darren Collison all had to play in a 3-point guard role, as Phoenix once had to deal with, and as we know, that didn't work out too well.
A quick note to make on the Dallas Mavericks. Former Villanova guard Malik Waynes, and Philadelphia 76er and Clippers player for a couple of years. He's just signed a deal with the Dallas Mavericks. It broke the last couple of days in Philadelphia. He was in the neighborhood, and I think he mentioned that he was going to play for the Dallas Mavericks Summer League team. I think getting that experience to work with the younger players after coming off some injuries would be a great fit for Malik. I think he would thrive under Dallas' system. He said he's really looking forward to playing with Dirk Nowitzki and Chandler Parsons, and he's really excited to get back in the NBA after playing a year in international basketball. So I think Malik Waynes is a name to look out for this upcoming year as a free agent. He's definitely overlooked, in my opinion.
Yeah, Waynes had to persevere through a lot of knee injuries, and he did inform us at our sports broadcasting play-by-play camp that he was going to sign a deal with Dallas. We do know that he went to a little Dallas mini camp, and players such as Greg Oden, Terrence Williams, and several others were involved, and Malik Waynes was obviously a standout star. As he told us, he performed really well in a few scrimmages that Dallas hosted, and Malik Waynes is going to be signing a contract for a team that does not have depth, rather, in the point guard or the shooting guard department. And considering that Rajon Rondo is out the door and Monte Ellis is out the door as well, I do think that Malik Waynes is a name to definitely look out for, as you recently said.
And with Monte Ellis leaving Dallas, I think a team emerging, not necessarily the Sixers because they're a couple years out of playoff contention, but a team like the Timberwolves. I know they're a little heavy at the guard position right now, but a team of that nature where they're coming up in the ranks of the NBA, I think they would definitely benefit from getting a Rajon Rondo or a Monte Ellis because of their veteran presence. And obviously Rajon Rondo's playoff experience would be extremely beneficial for a young team.
And speaking of young teams acquiring veteran presences, Brook Lopez, I believe, opted out of his contract, and Tyson Chandler is a player that may also be out the door for Dallas. So I think a team like Milwaukee may step in and try to re-sign Ellis, who they once had when he was a rookie, and also try to get players such as Brook Lopez and Tyson Chandler to clash veterans with rookie presences, as Michael Carter-Williams is a rookie who commands that team, but bringing on a player like Monte Ellis or Tyson Chandler can present much experience for those younger players on Milwaukee.
Yeah, we saw a couple years ago Monte Ellis spent some time with the Bucks. I think coming back into Milwaukee would be good because he and Michael Carter-Williams can share the ball in the guard positions and really make some noise in a young Milwaukee team that has a chance to make some noise, I think, as well in come playoffs in a few years. So look for Monte Ellis on the Bucks in a couple of years. I think that's a great spot for him to land. So Monte Ellis, Michael Carter-Williams, I think would be a great team.
The Bucks are an interesting team. Though last year, you got to remember, they made the playoffs 6th seed without arguably their best player, Jabari Parker, tearing his ACL. But when he comes back this year, it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to be a top 5 team or top 4 team in the East. Because him, Jabari, they're very young. They got Jabari, Giannis, Mike Carter-Williams. They got Chris Middleton, which proved himself last year as a good scorer. Giannis Antetokounmpo is only getting better. If you want to talk about the Bucks, they're going to be up there with the Sixers in a couple of years in playoff contention.
They had a lot of utility players step up and play roles that were really important for Milwaukee last year. We saw O.J. Mayo and Jared Dudley step up and play utility roles, but they brought an amazing asset for Milwaukee, constantly scoring decent numbers. I also think Giannis Antetokounmpo, a name that you mentioned, is a player that can become a star in just a few years. He has a lot of height on his side, and he also has a very big wingspan. He's a very shifty yet fast player, and he gets to the basket with ease. So I think Antetokounmpo in a few years will be one of the NBA's best players.
We have another fan checking in, thinking that the Knicks could possibly move Melo. And I think, honestly, that has no chance of surfacing. Carmelo Anthony, with his heavy contract in terms of years and money, the Knicks are looking to move him, but no team is wanting to take on that contract or a player of his attitude. I mean, he really is a negative player. Nobody really likes to play with him. And it's hard, I think, for the Knicks to be able to shop a guy like Carmelo with such a big contract and that negative reputation, even though he's excellent at all the great things he did for Team USA in the Olympics in 2012. He was an excellent player. We saw that coming out of Syracuse, winning a national championship, and thriving in Denver, and then coming over to New York and making some noise there. So, Carmelo, great player, poor attitude.
Carmelo Anthony, nobody's going to want him. Nobody's going to want him. Nobody's going to want that contract. Over $100 million for I think 4 years. His best chance at winning the championship would have been with signing with the Chicago Bulls, like a 2-year deal with a couple million. Because he could have played that 3 position, which Bulls don't have to go through. Mike Dunleavy's okay, but Carmelo Anthony is way better. He's an all-star. But now
I think Carmelo Anthony has an ego, and it could clash with a lot of players on other teams. Not that it's anything to take away with Carmelo, because he's a fantastic player, one of the best of this decade. But I do think the Knicks aren't planning on moving him, just as he doesn't plan on moving. He has a house in New York. He has raised his family in New York, and that's a destination where he'd like to stay. Another example of that, with the 4th overall pick, the Knicks selected a debatable player that a lot of Knicks fans weren't pleased about, Kristaps Porzingis, a foreign player. And like I said, a lot of fans were not pleased with that pick. Carmelo Anthony did his best job to defend the center forward type player because he's very excited. The Knicks also brought on board Jeremy Grant, Jeremiah Grant's brother. So I do think the Knicks are an explosive team on the rise with youth on their side.
Carmelo Anthony's one to normally criticize players, but recently in a SportsIllustrated.com bit, Carmelo said that the Knicks got a steal in terms of Kristaps Porzingis being able to stack him, and we saw how great basketball mixtape that he's a great athlete, great player. And at only 19 years old, he's going to make his mark in the NBA. So seeing that transition from international ball to NBA will be something to look out for. But with Carmelo Anthony on your side, I think Porzingis is in a great situation in New York.
Yeah, I do think New York's in a good position because they have a lot of salary, so they can go out and sign one or two free agents. And like I said, they're young and explosive. They have Porzingis and Jermaine Grant, two players that were fantastic last year in their own respective divisions and leagues. And Carmelo Anthony's a veteran that's always good, and he always provides. The Knicks, with great statistics, although health is an issue, I do think Carmelo Anthony's going to have yet another consistent good season.
The Knicks are actually my sleeper team. Maybe not this year, not next year. They got a lot of young talent to build around Carmelo Anthony. In the near future, I see them going deep in the playoffs. I don't know about winning the championship, but I think Carmelo will get his chance at the end of the ring.
Yeah, the NBA I think is really interesting this season. A lot of headlines, a lot of stories going in. I think looking out for a couple of teams, I think the Cavs are a team to follow, the Lakers, and in a couple of seasons, the Sixers. I'm really excited to see how the Sixers are moving forward and how they will adapt with the many centers they just picked up and all of that. So our final bit of tonight is NBA predictions. I know draft just happened, free agency is about to start, but we're going to give you all NBA predictions just for you guys here tonight. So Short Stack, why don't you start us off for tonight with your predictions in the NBA in terms of conference finals and NBA finals?
Well, that's a tough topic because the NBA finals is a long time away, and the conference finals is an even longer time away because the conference finals, well, actually, I mixed that up. I'm not going to start this off because I'm not too educated on this subject. I'm not too sure who I'd like to pick just yet. Chris, I know you're better than this than I am, so I'm going to let you start. I'm going to do a little bit of research, and then I'll come back.
Okay, we're starting off in the East. Cavaliers are going to come back to the NBA Finals. The Chicago Bulls are going to go deep in the playoffs, but there's no way that they can beat the Cavs. LeBron is better than he's ever been. Plus, he has probably the best team that he ever had, other than the Miami Heat teams. And sleeper teams in the East, you got the Bucks. You could throw in the Pistons there, but I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. They're probably going to be another lottery team. Other than that, the Hawks might make the playoffs again, and the Wizards. The Raptors are an interesting team because a couple years ago they were just the third seed, and they lost. They lost to the Brooklyn Nets. Last year they were the fourth seed, and they got swept by the Washington Wizards. I don't see them making the playoffs this year. They got too good too soon, and it's just going downhill for them. And when you go to the West, we're going to talk about the OKC Thunder. If Durant's healthy, I personally think the Thunder are going to win the NBA championship because they have Durant, which was an MVP, Russell Westbrook, which was in the MVP voting, and they got key players. They got Serge Ibaka, Steven Adams, Enes Kanter, and they just drafted Cameron Payne out of Murray State. Go ahead, Simon.
In terms of my predictions for the NBA finals, conference, and then total championship, I think the Eastern Conference Finals could go down yet again to be the Cavs and the Hawks. I really see LeBron reshaping his team under second-year coach David Blatt, and I think it'd be good to have that second year to adjust, re-sign Kevin Love, maybe move J.R. Smith or an Iman Shumpert to try and get some pieces for them. And even with or without Dellavedova, bringing some pieces in will be extremely important, but also rebuilding that core group of guys under LeBron James and David Blatt is extremely important. I think they'd play the Hawks. Most likely the Cavs would win. I know the Hawks are a very fundamentally sound team. They excellent shooting from guys like Kyle Korver, but I think the Cavs would pull out an Eastern Conference Finals bid to the NBA Finals. And on to the Western Conference, I really see the Golden State Warriors back at it again. I think they would make the finals by beating a team like you mentioned, Chris, Oklahoma City. Great team, up and coming with head coach Billy Donovan coming from Florida, replacing Scott Brooks. They're another team to follow, I think, this year, and they could possibly make it to the NBA Finals. We saw what they can do with Russell Westbrook when he's with full health, triple-doubles almost every night, and Kevin Durant, spot-up shooter for three, excellent athlete. So I think it's Warriors, Thunder in the Western Conference Finals, with the Warriors advancing to face the Cavs, like you mentioned earlier. Great series. I expect the Cavs. I couldn't really tell you whether it would go 6 or 7, knowing that it would be such a competitive series. But those are my picks for the finals.
Now, for myself, in each conference, there's 3 separate divisions: the Southeast Division and the Atlantic Division, and the Central Division. That's in the Eastern Conference. In the Western Conference, the Northwest Division, the Southwest Division, and the Pacific Division. In the Eastern Conference, I'm going to pick one team from each division to be at least a sleeper in my eyes. I think the Wizards are going to advance the furthest in the Southeastern Division because the Wizards are a young team. They're on the rise, and they're always usually good because they have good. They're led by John Wall, who's usually not going to let the team win, which is just part of his great attitude and leadership skills. From the Atlantic Division, I think the Raptors are going to advance yet again. I'm a very big fan of Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan. I think that's the best 1-2 punch in basketball. And once the Raptors are able to acquire a forward, maybe at the deadline, they could have acquired a decent one in the draft, but not necessarily. They went with a guard in DeLon Wright. So I do think if the Raptors are able to acquire a forward who isn't a utility player at the deadline, they'll be able to advance the furthest in the Atlantic Division. And in the Central Division, I think the Detroit Pistons, this is a debatable call with the Cavaliers in that division, and obviously, as you said, LeBron James at his peak in his career. I think Detroit is a fantastic team. Brandon Jennings coming off an ACL tear. I think he'll have a great comeback year. Reggie Jackson is a player to look out for. He's a very underrated player, yet he has a fantastic impact on Detroit. Stanley Johnson was a great player to draft because he's a forward for them. He plays the 3. Although Greg Monroe may be leaving Detroit, I think it'll be easy to replace him with Andre Drummond and maybe take a player that can play forward off of the bench and replace Drummond, who played the 4 position for Detroit. In the Western Conference, I think that the Thunder are going to advance from the Northeastern Division. The Thunder, as you said, are always usually good. Chris, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, when they're on their game and when they're healthy, which is usually most of the time, they're hard to stop. And they also did a great job picking up fantastic pieces at the deadline last season. From the Southwestern Division, I think New Orleans is a team to watch out for. They usually aren't proactive at the deadline, nor are they in the offseason. They're not making trades or obtaining free agents. They didn't have a draft pick at all this year either. But they do have Anthony Davis, who is arguably a top 3 basketball player, and he's only going to get better from this point on. Drew Holiday sat out a great amount of the season last year, but I do think Holiday, healthy, is a fantastic guard who can get rebounds and assists at the top of his game. He's a top-tier point guard. Eric Gordon is a very good guard who sat out most of last year with an injury. So I think that the Pelicans are a team that can advance pretty far with the addition of the Rockets, although the Southeastern Division is very tough, as every team in that division was over 500 last year. And in the Pacific Division, I'm going to have to go with Golden State, Simon. As you said, Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, that lineup is fantastic across the board. And not many teams are able to stop them because they're a great shooting team. And when they can't rely on their shooting, they usually put the ball in the paint, which is something that Andrew Bogut and Draymond Green can do.
Yeah, so that's been all NBA talk here tonight on Roundtable Talk, our first episode. I would like to thank my colleagues Brock Landis and Chris Brown for tuning in and helping me out tonight. Guys, thanks so much. Thanks for all of our viewers and listeners. You can find us on YouTube, on my YouTube page, Simon Williams. This will be going on the SBC High blog page at www.sbchive.blogspot.com. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Make sure you keep checking into for more Roundtable Talk episodes. For your host, Simon Williams, that's me. Thanks so much, guys.